Welcome back to Represent NYC on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. My name is Victoria Burt. We are joined now by Harvey Epstein, who's an assembly member in District 74. So, a lot of stuff has been happening within the last couple of weeks since the death of George Floyd and this massive call for police reform here in the city. Talk to me a little bit about what you've accomplished up in Albany.
Yeah, I think it's really been a trying time for our city, state, and country. And obviously the issues of systemic racism have just become more clear and apparent by the killing of George Floyd. And that allowed legislation that's been hanging on for years to come before the state legislature, just to make it illegal to use chokeholds. It's in the NYPD manual, but it wasn't illegal. To ensure that the 50A, which is a tool which traditionally was to protect the community and everyone from information, now has been really used as a sword by the police to ensure that their prior bad acts are being hidden. We learned early on the police officer who killed George Floyd had a 20-year history of police abuse. We don't know the same for Penalize, who killed Eric Gardner. In my district, we have an Officer Garcia, who brutalized one of my constituents, Donnie Wright. We don't have the history. And now with the repeal of 50A, it allows us to get that information. So we know as taxpayers how we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for police officers who are committing these crimes. And then really we need to be thinking, once it's repealed, is this really how we want our taxpayer dollars paid? And is this really the appropriate way that we use the police in our city, state, and country? So what does that mean? Do we want police in our schools? Should police officers giving out tickets for traffic infractions? Do we should have social workers in schools instead of police officers? Maybe we should have the Department of Transportation staff giving out tickets instead of police officers. Maybe we should have people who are trained to support the issues of people with mental health issues as first responders when people are being called instead of officers when we see lots of people with mental health struggles. I think we rely on the police to do a lot, and they aren't trained and aren't the best suited. The other issue is, is the training and support sufficient for officers? Right now, you can get a 2-year associate degree at 20 years old and go into the NYPD. Are people mature enough to do that? Maybe they need a bachelor's degree. I'm a lawyer. I have an obligation I had to get a college degree, and then I had to go to law school, and then I have an obligation to do continuing legal education. I have an ongoing obligation in my career. Maybe we need to do the same with police officers.
So you mentioned also in their protests and police being at protests, and something that we saw during the last days, they've been protesting since, as we're taping now, for 20 days, but in the beginning we definitely saw police officers covering their badges. Talk to me a little bit about that legislation that's going to make that something they can't do.
Yes. Right now, that's in the police manual. You're supposed to not cover your badge. In 2018, City Council passed a bill that requires police officers to disclose who they are and to give out business cards. What we've seen is, there's no penalties to that. So if you have a rule with there's no infractions and there's penalties, there's no obligation. I've actually approached officers and said, "Can I have your name and your badge number?" And they covered up the badge. I've seen it happen to myself, and I'm a white privileged man, and I've seen it happen throughout the protest where they had covering over their badge numbers, and they were just like, "We're instructed to do it." That can't be the law. We need to make sure that that's a crime, and that crime should be prosecuted. The idea of saying to an officer, "You can hide your identity," is deeply problematic, and deeply problematic that either a union or a system would allow that to happen. So we want to make sure, one, you can't do it, and two, if you do it, there's penalties associated with doing it.
Talk to me a little bit about the body cam. What is to stop them from implementing that same sort of protection against the body cam, covering it, stopping it, turning it off, taping it over? Well,
part of the package of bills we passed last week, thank you for a reminder, was around making sure that on any stop that they are, especially traffic stops, they have the body cam and the car cam on, and ensuring our state troopers now are required to have that as well. The governor has yet to sign the bill, but it's really to say, the best way to learn about something is to have the evidence there. What we've learned is the video evidence has been extremely helpful. The video evidence, of George Floyd's killing was useful to spur this outrage. It's not like this wasn't happening before, but the footage that we would all be able to watch made it that more impactful. And so I think people, one, if people are engaging in illegal conduct, we'll be able to prosecute them because we'll have the video cams. And two, is I think people will be less likely to engage in that behavior if they know they're being watched.
So talk to me a little bit about how do we now, do you think, move forward in this sort of like very frayed relationship between the community and the police?
I think we need better oversight of the police, honestly, and I think the mayor's fine. He hires a commissioner, but the mayor hires the chancellor, and we have school boards or CECs. We have oversight systems in place for accountability for our schools, but we don't have that for our officers. We have these precinct councils, but are just appointed by the local precinct. There's not like a body that gets elected to oversee the precincts to build the police community relations. A community board and a community education council or school board those are people who are embedded in the neighborhood, who've been appointed by their elected official or elected by the community, like their school community. Those people are invested and deeply committed to those neighborhoods. And then they have real responsibility and oversight over a system. That needs to be in place for the NYPD as well. We need much more community oversight and community engagement, because otherwise there's no accountability. An officer can do whatever they want. They'll be like, well, their captain's okay. If the captain doesn't feel accountable to the neighborhood that they're in, captains be like, we're good, because all they have to do is make sure that their commissioner is with them. But if there's some local accountability, it'll really change the dynamics.
I hope it does. I think it's a much needed change. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to me.